Ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, welcome to this panel discussion, which will address strategies to canalize funding towards culture in post-crisis situations. My name is Lazare, Eloundou, Assomo. I'm the Director for Culture and Emergencies at UNESCO in Paris, and I'm really honored to be with you and to moderate this important session today. But before I start, I just want to recall, probably for some of you who did not attend the opening ceremony, because there were some very important thoughts made by His Excellency Mohammed Khalifa Al-Mubarak in his welcome remarks, but also the Director-General. And I think one of the things that he said took to all of us who are involved in the culture sector, which is that we are the solution for the whole humanity, especially today, because culture is good for our soul, culture is good for our moral. But of course, today we're going to speak about funding. But I just want to recall this because as we are going to have this discussion and the audience is going to follow us, it will be important also to have this in mind, because culture and cultural diversity are heavily affected, as you all know, by emergencies resulting from conflicts, natural, human-induced disasters, civil unrest, and I can name more and more of them. And in particular, we can even see it today because of this ongoing global sanitary crisis. And that's also one of the reasons why we are having this cultural summit in digital. So in this context, cultural heritage and cultural life are far from being, liabilities. They are incredible resources that we can tap into to support the resilience of all the affected communities, to rebuild their societies and foster economic development. But to do so, there is a need to direct support to this sector at a time when many other needs are considered more urgent or more important. Restoring infrastructures, for instance, ensuring access to food and water, guaranteeing shelters, improving sanitary conditions of communities, there are all undoubtedly essential needs which needs to be addressed as rapidly as possible. The challenge, of course, is hence how to advocate for culture not being a luxury. And I think that's the reason why I started by recalling some of the few things that were said at the beginning. Because a strategic sector, of course, is culture sector, and it has the potential to support long-term recovery. Luckily, culture offers a great and unexplored potential for partnerships, for instance, partnership with governments, with international organizations, but also innovative models such as public-private ventures, philanthropy, or social corporate responsibility. I wanted to give this background before we start, simply because, these are some of the key questions that this panel discussion will be addressing today. And if I can recall some of them, what financial models are the most viable? What new partners need to be involved? And how can existing partners support this global advocacy? So to discuss this, I will say these important matters, I'm honored and privileged to have three distinguished panelists with us today. Mrs. Sarah Rinaldi, who's the head of unit for Middle East and Central Asia within the Directorate-General for International Partnership of the European Commission. Welcome. We also have Mrs. Sanne Letschert, who's the head of Cultural Emergency Response at the Prince Claus for Culture and Development Fund. Welcome. And finally, we have His Excellency, Mr. Peter Rez, who's the ambassador and permanent delegate of Germany to UNESCO. I'm really honored to have all of you in this panel. So let me start with the first question to Mrs. Letschert. The Cultural Emergency Response Program of the Prince Claus Fund for Development that you lead focuses on providing first aid, I think that's the word, to cultural heritage affected by conflict and disasters. You have supported, I think, if our researchers are correct, I think around 450 operations in 80 countries around the world. That's impressive. But in your view, Mrs. Letschert, what do the achievement of this numerous projects reveal about the importance to protect culture in post-crisis context?
Yes, thank you for that question. And it's an important one. I think through the projects we have supported, we have seen what it means to communities to face the loss of their culture. And we have also seen how these communities have worked tirelessly to save that culture. And after they succeeded, we heard how it has helped them to regaining hope and resilience and how it brought them together as a community. And I feel that has to do with two things. First of all, culture is not a renewable commodity. When it's gone, and communities lose resources for economic development, tourism, commerce, and with it their shared identity, knowledge, and creativity. And secondly, these projects made us realize how much we value culture and its artifacts as an inherent element of humanity. And this is why at the Prince Claus Fund, we strongly believe that culture is a basic need. So like food and health, culture is indispensable to human existence. Culture connects individuals to their communities and histories and is integral to human identity. So it provides people with a certain strength and cultural resilience. And for this reason, we need initiatives, programs, and mechanisms that protect culture when it's under threat, to limit the damage, especially actually in those crisis situations, because our projects have taught us that if the response is well targeted and delivered in the earliest possible stages, there's a much greater chance actually of salvaging culture from being lost. And that is important because the projects also clearly show that the destruction of cultural heritage is perceived as a fundamental loss. So rescuing culture helps affected communities to reaffirm their sense of identity, of community, but also of human dignity. And that actually especially goes for deprived or excluded communities, as it provides them with a different story than the prevailing one that marginalizes them. So cultural rescue, especially in post-crisis situations, is also about the preservation of the world's cultural diversity, actually. So it's about the safeguarding the variety of cultures and stories and histories, and that contributes to more inclusive societies. And when we evaluate our projects, we also see how working with local actors to save heritage with a cultural and social value for the community greatly enhances social cohesion, but also mental recovery after crisis. So saving such sites goes far beyond just saving the tangible. It also brings hope and support for communities living in critical situations and can actually help their sense and strengthen their sense of continuity. And This is also why I think we regard the Cultural Emergency Response Program of the Prince Claus Fund not so much as a heritage preservation program, but more as a program that provides cultural continuity. Because in the end, it's about saving people and not just sites or objects. And this became so evident in the most recent rapid relief project we supported in Beirut after the explosion, where the cultural scene and the role the city has in the region is so much part of the city's identity. And to be able to resume that role and to restore that part of the identity, it's actually crucial that cultural practices continue. So I'm speaking about artistic production, collaborations, exchange, exhibitions, etc. And this is also why we helped smaller cultural organizations resume their activities. So, well, to conclude, after all those years of being active in the field and the numerous projects we have supported, we have mainly learned how important it is for cultural emergency response to operate alongside the response to basic humanitarian needs. And this is mainly given its importance in rebuilding and reaffirming social and cultural identity, fostering the sense of community and social cohesion, but also for the transfer of skills, for example, and generating income. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly in crisis situations, it's important for the hope the protection of culture in post-crisis situation gives to affected communities and the contribution it can have to in processes of building peace and reconciliation.
No, thank you so much for bringing all this. I think you said some very important things about the need to reaffirm the sense of identity, dignity. And what struck me also was what you said about the fact that cultural rescue, brings hope to communities. And I think we speak about hope because we all have seen this weekend, how, the hope that Pope Francis brought in his visit in Iraq, when he visited, some of the affected cities like Mosul, where, for example, UNESCO, with the support of the United Arab Emirates, we're rebuilding both the important minaret, the mosque, but also the churches, to foster this interreligious dialogue and bring hope to all the communities at the same time. And I think this is what we as an international community, we all have to do. And what you have said, brings this to my mind. You also mentioned, of course, some of the actions that you are doing in Beirut, and that brings me to the second question. And I like to now move to His Excellency Ambassador Rez, because you are a very I will say you're very active here at UNESCO on this thing, and following the devastating blast that have affected the center of Beirut last 4 August. You have followed it closely, and you have supported the Lebanese ambassador here in Paris and all the communities. When UNESCO identified, the rehabilitation of the cultural heritage of Beirut and promoted the revival of its cultural life as a strategic priority, through our Director-General, who then launched the flagship initiative Beirut. You reacted very quickly, if I can say that. Your leadership was very important to move, and your country has decided to be from the onset among the key supporters of this effort, contributing to the urgent stabilization of sheltering of I think around 12 important historic buildings in the historic areas of Jemaise and Mar Michael in Beirut. So, Ambassador, I really want to hear from you. I think everyone wants to hear from you. If you can tell us exactly at a moment like that, what motivated your country to not hesitate to grant support to support the strategic area of work.
Thank you very much, Lazare, for your kind words. Thank you, first of all, for this kind invitation that you give me the chance to address you today. And I cannot but subscribe what Sanne was speaking about human dignity and what you just said about the visit of the Holy Father in Mosul and in Baghdad. And we cannot overestimate the repercussion of such a meeting when a country like Iraq declares the 5th of March now a national holiday for the coming years for national conciliation. Speaking about Beirut, thank you that I can speak today, this day, about Beirut, because if you have seen the news today all over Iraq, but especially in Beirut, there is what they call lundi de colère. All the big streets are blocked, not only in Beirut, in Saida in the south, in Tripolis and in Tyre and wherever in the country. People there, it's not it's not one problem. They have this political crisis. They have this economic crisis. They have, as a surplus, the COVID-19 crisis. And all this is accumulating. They don't have the money to buy the basic. A bottle of water, a bottle of milk is now about $23 for them. It's amazing how people can survive at all. And the colère, as they say, it's going up, and we don't know what the end might be. We hope there's no violence, but everything is possible, as the government was not in a situation to respond to this country since months. We all remember when President Macron came to, after the explosion to Beirut, he said, in a month's time, I'll come back and we shall see a new government. Until today, we are at the beginning of March, we don't have a new government in Lebanon. To answer your question, Lazare, Lebanon is not for Germans, the normal German citizen is not a hard affair as it is for a normal French man. It's not the century-long history. It's not the story of the mandate after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. It's not that we have a huge German-speaking community of Lebanese in Germany as the French have here in Paris. We have Lebanese living in Germany, yes, this is true, but they're not coming from Beirut. Basically, they're coming more from the south of the country or from the Bekaa Valley. So what I want to say, there's no natural link, no pressure group within Germany to have Lebanon. But after the double explosion, the 4th of August, we thought we have to act quickly and to help this country, this devastated countries, and especially the area about Jemaise and Ashrafiyeh, this nice, vivid cultural areas where people go to literary cafes, to music halls, to galleries, where really you can still smell the spirit of the former Beirut, where people said, this is really the Paris of the Orient, which is unfortunately, which Beirut never regained after the devastating civil war, who ended only in the 90s. But in this area, Ashrafiyeh and Jemaise, you could still have it, and it was this area where artists and people like to hang out, and we wanted, with our help, show that we reconstruct these houses, with the shelter these houses. So our attempt was very modest to give the sign, life will come back, artistic life will come back, cultural life will come back. The spirit of Beirut is not lost forever. Of course, we helped in the first days after the 4th of August by rescue teams with sniffle dogs. We survived tents and medicaments and all you need. But to help on a more sustainable, long run for Beirut seemed to us very, very important indeed. The Liberate project by UNESCO and by Audrey Azoulay, I think, helps us in Germany to help twice. Once to help people in Beirut directly with our money to reconstruct houses, but at the same time by supporting the idea, the UNESCO idea of multilateralism. You know, Germany has launched together with France in a German-Franco project, the Alliance for the Multilateralism. And there's no better example than this one to help in the framework of multilateralism, Beirut. We give our money twice, once to Beirut to reconstruct houses there, but we give it to UNESCO as well to underline our commitment for multilateralism. And this should be the message after what Lazare you said about the visit of the Pope to Iraq, or what Sanne told about the human dignity and cultural projects. We have to say this is one world. This is not a natural thing. COVID crisis showed us so clearly. This is something which can happen to everybody everywhere in the world, and there's no language, no cultural clash. There's not even a distinction between countries in development or countries, so-called developed countries. COVID crisis is attacking all of us in the same way, and therefore this is the sign to help in this alliance for multilateralism. Let me just finish by saying how successful this project was for German, this German contribution. We wanted to have 12 houses, and it worked so well, and they did so much economies that they can now shelter 18 houses in this area. Still, it's only a drop of the whole hot stone, but it's a nice thing that they can continue to help and to shelter other buildings as well. If you go there, the situation is catastrophic. The situation is still looks like an after civil war, and people know what it means, a civil war there. And now with this economic crisis, we are really at the edge of a revolution. And I hope at least that politics will react this time better than they did in the last times. And maybe we can continue to discuss afterwards in the discussion. Thank you.
No, this is really great, Ambassador Rez, for all what you have really mentioned, and I think no one else could say it better as you did, because and I'm sure that this message that you are passing, which is heard by many other governments who are following us in this world, will understand how multilateralism in this context, it's more relevant than before, and that joining not only UNESCO but also other efforts made by the cultural actors, like you have said, supporting them, supporting that cultural life comes back. It's really important. So we cannot stop by using this opportunity to say that it's important to continue supporting the revival of the cultural life in Beirut. And really thank you for expressing so well the motivation and the determination of Germany to really support the cultural life revival of Beirut. That brings me now to you, Sarah, if you allow me to call you Sarah, because the interventions that what am I going to say, that you we are trying to say, the European Union for you has I would say pioneeringly supported efforts related to culture in emergency at a time when a few stakeholders and partners operating in security and peace building sector did, including in the Middle East. Can you also explain why, you know, you as the European Union support, you know, culture in emergencies.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Lazare, for the question, and thank you very much for inviting me in this important seminar and conference. Indeed, the European Union very much believes that culture, in the broad sense of it, including cultural heritage, cultural and creative industries, intercultural and interfaith dialogue, culture can support post-crisis reconstruction and recovery. And this is shown by the joint interventions of the European Union and UNESCO that we have in Iraq and Yemen. I will focus on these two countries in my intervention. But first, to answer your more general question, indeed, and very much in line with the previous speakers, this is really something that we mobilize. Of course, we do infrastructure. Of course, we do education, food, nutrition, all other sectors which are important for people's lives, but culture is part of it. And we've seen now in this crisis situation with the COVID-19 pandemic that really culture is very important as well. So the European Union places high value on cultural goods, cultural heritage, and its restoration. Indeed, because especially in those countries in crisis, cultural heritage gives identity. And identity is crucial to foster reconciliation and to build societies and nations. Culture can help overcome the devastating effects of conflicts and divisions. And it's so much important for countries like Iraq, coming out of a devastating conflict, or like Yemen, where despite the war, we need to try and keep the social fabric while at the same time preserving invaluable cultural heritage for the next generations of Yemenis. So preserving the symbols of civilizations is important for the collective memory and for the identity of populations. It is said that if you don't know your past, you cannot know your future. So without culture, actually, there's no future. And we really want to preserve this. Of course, as Sanne said, the protection and the reconstruction of cultural heritage is not only important because it's central to people's identity, but because also it has a great potential for boosting the local economy. Precious skills can be transferred to young people, to new generations, and open new opportunities for revenue. And we know as well that going back to the path of prosperity is key as well to ensure peace and reconciliation. So we have seen the destruction of cultural heritage in Europe, notably during the Second World War and beyond, and more recently in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. We know that what has taken our ancestors generations to build can be destroyed in a matter of seconds if we don't act to preserve it. And we also know that in the midst of a crisis, cultural heritage that is neglected or exposed to the forces of nature can be as much damage as when it's exposed to violent or man-made destruction. So bringing back culture, education, and jobs in society are the strongest statements to establish and preserve peace, which is our ultimate goal in those countries. And that is why UNESCO's mandate and work to protect cultural heritage is essential. And that's why as well, also believing in multilateralism, we want to work with you, and we are working with you. So now in Yemen, of course, you know, it's not only the world's largest humanitarian crisis, but also one of the most acute situations in terms of human development. It has been set back by 40 years, although it was not starting from a very from a very good point. In a country where 70% of the population are below the age of 25, this paints a grim picture for the future. So 6 years of conflict have devastated people's lives and livelihoods. They have also threatened to destroy a rich cultural heritage of importance, not only to the Yemeni people, but also to humanity. So this is why we have now with UNESCO a cash for work project that has not only contributed to preserve the rich social fabric in Yemeni communities, but also preserved traditional skills and craftsmanship. It has also sustained the hope for progress, for better opportunities for young people. Iraq, as you know, is a country with a mosaic of ancient and multicultural roots that makes the country complex, but as well incredibly rich. Yet Iraqis have witnessed years of war, crisis, and chaos, and this had led to many families, lives, and identities being uprooted and displaced. So the human side of reconstruction is therefore essential, as it fosters social cohesion and contributes to sustainable peace building. So we have underlined this politically and financially for many years. Since you were talking about funding, for example, we pledged 400 million euro to rebuild the social contract in Iraq between people and between the citizens and their institutions. That's a pledge we made in Kuwait in 2018. And we are working with UNESCO and as part of a more global effort to reconstruct Mosul and Basra in particular. Thank you.
Thank you so much for mentioning this, Sarah. And it's really an opportunity to again, you know, thank the European Union as a very important partner on this specific subject of supporting culture in crisis situation, because I think again because these images are just in my mind because I was watching them yesterday on CNN and others and Al Jazeera and all the channels where you know Pope Francis were going through the street of Mosul, and we could see also some of the houses being rehabilitated, and this rehabilitation are supported by the European Union, some of them, and I think it's an opportunity to really thank the European Union and to thank for the work also that has been done even for the reconstruction of the mausoleums in Mali with the European Union and what you are doing also in Yemen and otherwhere. So of course, I think in this context of multilateralism, the European Union as an important partner is definitely needed. So that's very important. I want to move again now to you, Sanne, because in particular, after hearing Ambassador Rez of what he said when he illustrated, you know, from the perspective of the government, how the you know, countries are seeing some of this in intervention. And I'm sure that you know, of course, Sarah will also agree with me on this issue, and we know how, while the number of actors supporting the strategic areas of work is increasing, but we also recognize that much remains to be done. So my question to you is, what steps and tools are necessary in your view to strengthen and you know, our capacity to convince, you know, in particular the private sector, and I'm sure you have some experience to share with everyone.
Yes, thank you, Lazare, for that question. And this is actually something we have been thinking about a lot, and it's becoming one of the focus points of our program, actually, especially now we are moving towards becoming an independent organization. As of 2022, we are also looking at this question, actually. And we feel that to help the field of cultural emergency response grow, to attract more structural funding and to make it more sustainable, some things are very important. So first of all, there is a need to work directly with local partners to strengthen the local capacity to protect and respond, because currently regional and local organizations lack the financial means or expertise on cultural emergency response and are therefore dependent on international initiatives that determine the focus and approach. But in our 17 years of existence, we have actually learned that cultural emergencies can only be adequately addressed if local actors are in the lead. I mean, they are the ones that are highly aware of the local context and needs, of methods and materials and social customs and sensitivities. However, a recent scan and analysis of the field of heritage rescue that we conducted that looked at funding for heritage worldwide showed that local communities actually can only access 18% of the available funding to resolve local emergencies, and especially when crisis is caused by natural disaster. Although climate change will, of course, affect these communities the most. So we need to focus on strengthening local capacity through longer-term regional investments. This to build a strong and inclusive cultural protection sector, with, of course, the aim that local and regional entities themselves can manage the rescuing and preservation of cultural heritage that is important to them. And we feel that to this end, more structural funding needs to be made available for this field in general, because this will make the sector stronger, more sustainable, and more visible. But in order to make that happen, we also need to step up our efforts to build more evidence, actually, on the importance of cultural rescue and to really make this case. Because for you and me, the importance of safeguarding culture is evident, but to convince the private sector and governments that structural funding for this field is needed, we really need to illustrate the impact of our work, but also showcase the long-term effect it has, and not to forget the difference that our work is actually making for affected communities. And currently, there's just so little data available in our fields. There's not much known on or numbers available on the significance of the loss of culture and the effect this has on communities. But there's also no data available on the impact of the loss of culture on, for example, adjacent fields such as peace building and reconciliation. So I think a good solution would be to build evidence through coordinated research and impact studies to convince policymakers and other stakeholders that rescuing culture is actually an important part of building back after crisis and restoring the resilience of communities. And lastly, I mentioned this before, but I feel the ultimate aim should be that humanitarian disaster relief efforts integrate culture more in their approaches, and actually cultural rescue is integrated more in humanitarian relief initiatives on the ground. So in other words, cultural rescue needs to be mainstreamed more. And to make the field stronger, more sustainable, I think a better collaboration, what the other panelists have mentioned as well. A better collaboration between all those parties is needed, including humanitarian relief organizations and first aiders, because we all know this is important. And I feel it's a task of governments and international organizations, NGOs, working in the field of cultural emergency response to work together in combining efforts, sharing best practices, resources, and data to convince others as well.
No, thank you so much. I think you tackled the issue here. That is, how successful can we be to really illustrate or showcase the impact of what we are doing on culture beyond the physical rehabilitation, and what it brings to the recovery of the communities, the long-term impact on contributing to peace, reconciliation, and to development itself. Because I think we never say it a lot, but with some of us who have been involved in a post-conflict reconstruction in the field, like myself in Mali, we could see that the first sector that creates job in difficult situation is cultural activities. and that we don't say it a lot, but we see it and we think it's natural. And I think it's important to showcase it, to show how important it is. And thanks for showing it. But I mean, having said that, it brings me back to you, Ambassador Rice, because you have been able to really understand the importance of it, and in your position as a government representative, I mean, you have to translate for your government some of this issue, and I think you're better placed to now to really know that culture still struggles to be considered as a sector that requires emergency situation. We hear every time that the food, water, shelter, sanitation are given priorities, and which is quite normal and important. I think we nobody agrees about it, but in the same line, like it was said previously, what else would you suggest to convince governmental actors that culture is key for post-crisis rehabilitation and recovery? And what advice would you also give in the kind of path that will need to be brought on board, Ambassador, in your view?
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you. Let me take the example of my own country, a wealthy country where we don't suffer from civil war and things like this, but we suffer from the COVID crisis. And we need a recovery after COVID-19 one day as well. And I hope this day will be very soon. Of course, support in emergency situation has to come in a quick, efficient, and a generous way, quickly, rapidly. But speaking about culture, I think it's more complicated. In Germany, many theaters, museums, or orchestras are state-owned, and the musicians or the actors have a quasi-status of civil servants, or they have a fixed contract, or they are not, and they need state money as jobless people, but still they survive. This is a luxury problem for wealthy countries like Germany. But this is not the fact I want to speak about. The fact is not to allow an actor, a musician, to be on scene, to perform, to do what his life is about, to have the applause, to have the audience. This is cruel, and it takes too long time now for them. It's about a year they cannot perform. I have a wonderful friend, a conductor from Germany, Thomas Hengelbrock. He has his artistic residence just installed in the Chateau Fontainebleau, close to Paris. And he's created his own orchestra and his own choir, the Balthasar Neumann Ensemble. He pays it out of his pocket. This is an international thing with Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Greece, Egypt, Cuba, Venezuela, wherever you want, his musicians come from. So we, as a UNESCO delegation, together with our French colleague, we are supporting this this idea of an artistic residence in Fontainebleau, and he was finding solutions to perform. What did he do? They were all together in hotel. They did all together the quarantine. They had tests before, they had tests in the middle, they had tests in the end. They got the meals in front of the doors, like the stories you hear from the shutdown and lockdown in China. And they could, for the first time, perform together as an orchestra, as a choir. This was very inventive. And they went to the Salzburg festival in January, the Mozart Week. They went to Baden-Baden, they went to Basel, and soon they will perform in Fontainebleau. Artists can be very inventive themselves. What can we do to help them? We should not forget about them when they come back on scene after the crisis, and we just continue to have our normal life and we take it for granted. This is not true. Many of these little theaters, little music hall, little café littéraire, they will die if we don't go there and pay our contribution and say, this is important for our daily life, because this is important for me. The cultural life is a daily life thing. Of course, there's this highlights in our lives when we have Fischer Dieskau singing or Alfred Brendel playing or whatever. But the daily life is a cultural life. It's not only something, a cherry on the cake. It's not something for Saturday night pleasure to go somewhere and to enjoy something other people prevent us. No, we are culture. Culture is coming to us, and we have to react and to speak with culture. So what can we do? It's us, the public, first of all. It's the artists, as my example with Tom Hengelbock showed. And of course, it's the government. Whom to bring aboard? I think it should be the whole of the society, all NGOs and all government bodies to understand this is what our life distinguishes lives from a non-cultural society. It's about us. This is the expression of ourselves. That is what we want to be. This is what we are. And let me finish with to bring an UNESCO element. It is democratic participation as well. It is about education and culture. Take these young people who cannot, if you're 17 years old, 1 year is much longer in respect to your lifespan than to elder ones. A year without direct culture, without going out, without going to this cultural space, it's horrible. They are deprived to take part in a what I would call education and culture. So, and we have culture, we have education. Here we are, UNESCO. So UNESCO should have a lead here to underline always this importance of culture in our daily life. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ambassador, for raising in the last part of your intervention this important issue of education on culture, because it's fundamental, and I think it's good to mention it so that it's not forgotten in the way we are looking at the issue of convincing in our approach. It brings me to the last question to you, Sarah, because you mentioned you know, in your intervention, some of the intervention mentioned in the Middle East that you have, like the one on Yemen. I like to refer to it, because it has adopted an innovative and forwarding funding modality, like the cash for work scheme, for instance. And I mean, for what you have seen, what appears for you as the main result that this innovative interventions have produced?
Thank you. Indeed, in this difficult context, we have to be innovative, at the same time using implementation modalities that are used in other contexts as well. And indeed, we use a lot the financing modality of cash for work because we believe it has a tangible effect on livelihoods. It also demonstrates the added value of a human-centered approach to cultural heritage that puts the needs of the communities up front. And indeed, I would like to speak in particular about this project that we have in Yemen. It has assessed over 8,000 historical buildings in 4 historic cities of the country: Sana'a, Shibam, Zabid, and Aden. And has so far rehabilitated over 60 historical buildings. And when I say historical buildings, it's not only museums or monuments. It's really buildings where people live, normal people live, and this is very much this is important. It's really family homes, and from the testimonies we got from the projects, we see that people use words like dignity, empowerment. I mean, they feel restored in their dignity by living in beautiful buildings, beautiful houses, typical of Yemen, but that are in which they can live in a sound manner. In addition to that, of course, the work has created jobs for almost 1,000 young people under the age of 35 in Yemen, and this is very much important. It's a source of revenue for them to pay for food, to bring food on the table of their family. And we know that in the context of Yemen, where there's a huge famine going on, this is crucial. It also supports the local economy, but also an important part is that for most of these young people, it's an alternative, or for all of them, it's an alternative to being part of the war economy. We give them jobs that go together with skills, valuable skills that they will have for their whole life, and that builds an alternative to the war, and that builds the future. So this is why really cash for work is really essential, an essential part of this project. It has also helped restore and preserve the National Museum of Sana'a. The structure was closed before the conflict started, and some artifacts have been stolen from it. And we hope that the project will facilitate the reopening of the museum when the conditions allow, of course, but in the meantime, it's being restored. And through its small grants program to cultural civil society organizations, local organizations, the project invests as well in cultural and creative industries as a source of income for young people as well. So, for example, the project has fostered a network of young Yemeni cultural operators, including very active social media influencers. And the project has been active in involving the network with various initiatives connected to increasing youth engagement in peace building. So we come back to this objective, this ultimate objective of building the peace.
No, thanks a lot for sharing this and the importance of this tangible and immediate effect that at least contribute to that has an impact on livelihoods and everything. Now, I think I see that there has been a few questions sent on the chat, but I just want you to quickly respond to 3 of them that I have selected for each of you. I don't know if I made the right choice, but I think you certainly have an idea. But if you can just be a little bit, quick in 1 minute or 2 minutes to answer this question. There is a question to you, Ambassadoress. I think what you have said has brought a lot of interest, and someone would like to know, like when there are some multiple channels of funding during the response of a crisis, let's say like the one in Beirut. In the meantime, also there is a significant loss during this kind of process. Do you think that centralization of funding post-crisis is, as a mechanism, can provide, efficiency, or should this kind of mechanism change?
Thank you. First of all, to answer your question, multiple channels, just to remind everybody, the project Liberot is not closed. It's still bitterly needed on this both branches, on the education branch and on the sheltering and reconstruction of houses. And when the houses are reconstructed, we still need money to reconstruct the underground of the National Museum in Beirut. It's not in this very area, but it is affected by the explosion as well. So Liberot is still alive, needs a lot of money. Lazare is, and others are collecting money, and if I can use this opportunity to tell anybody, we did the best, really the best. We had the best experience with the wonderful team here in Paris and the wonderful team in Beirut. Really, here we have something, as I said before, and you can have, you give $1 and you receive $2, because you give it to the multilateralism and you give it to your project. So this is still going on. Centralization, very good question. Of course, this seems to be a simple solution to give it to one, and then it's more effective. Personally, I doubt. I'm not sure, because I like this creativity of grassroots engagement where people know what they can do. I think what you can foster is advice and consultations on how you can spend the money. And Beirut is a perfect example. But I would not think that centralization is always the best solution to all problems of the world.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ambassador. And to you, Sanne, just very quickly, I don't know if, but I think Prince Claus has supported probably some because it's some project probably to support some museums in the post-crisis. I'm not sure, but there is a question to you, just very quickly in 1 minute. How can the pandemic affect the opening of new museums around the world? I mean, someone is asking the question. I mean, I don't know if you have an idea.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm an expert on reopening after pandemic, because that's of course a very complicated issue. But I do know that there's a lot of things that museums can do to prepare for that and already start engaging their audiences before reopening. And as soon as possible. I mean, there must be ways in which visitor streams can be guided, in which it made more accessible and safe for people to come back to the museums, because I think it should happen quickly, because we should not forget how much museums have become a place of community interaction as well. So
okay, all right. No, thanks a lot for you, and to you, Sarah. It's a question about the EU. Does the EU have policies to assure some relief for immigrants through its cultural program? This is also, I mean, someone who asked the question.
Immigrants where? In Europe or? So I'm only working in the programs we have in country and in the Middle East countries, and in particular Yemen and Iraq. In Iraq, for example, indeed there are lots of refugees from Syria. There are a lot of internally displaced persons due to the conflict. And certainly culture is also maybe not a priority sector of intervention, because we focus a lot on the humanitarian needs and the job creation. But certainly this is an important aspect that we have in some projects as well, targeting these populations.
Thanks a lot. I wanted to continue this debate and ask many questions, because what you have said and shared with everyone, it's so valuable and important, and it's really it gives a lot of food for thought on how to do. But we have to wrap up, because it's just 3 minutes left, and I like to say that. Really, we've had some very interesting perspective from all of you, and I think from those who are representing international organizations, for those who are representing government authorities, and I think what you have said on the strategic importance of trying to canalize some funds and addressing some issues are really important, because these are what we call lessons learned that could also be continued to use in future. But like you have said, Ambassador Reyes, you know, some of the initiatives that we mentioned are still open, like the Beirut, and then people can continue to support them. Thank you for this one, including also in the EU. Some of the projects are still ongoing. Thank you for supporting it. We something that is also important I wanted to share personally is also that, you know, it's not about big amount or small amount. It's about, you know, channeling funds and contributing. One example is that, you know, there are some tools that are being used for intervention on post-crisis, like some recommendations. Like I mean, I have in mind the Warsaw recommendation, which was in English and French, and now through small funding, we were able to translate it in Arabic. And then it allows, you know, share and spread, you know, all the tools that people can use after that to be able to build their strategies. And this has some of the few things that are very important. Some of these tools are also available within UNESCO and need support and many things. So thank you so much for all what you have said. And if you are for the audience, if you are interested to continue discussing this issue, there will be a case study later in the program on public and private support to post-disaster rehabilitation in Beirut, for instance, which will focus on the recovery of cultural life, as ambassadors you have mentioned, and I think it might be starting very soon. I don't know, but so allow me to thank all of you, all the panelists in particular, too. And I think our panel was quite equal. We have 2 women, 2 men, and on a special day of the International Day of Women, you know, for women rights. So HMAT is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us during this online session of the Abu Dhabi Culture Summit. And thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.